How does society separate people into groups? What classifies allowing a person to do what they want to do? What is the most coveted thing you can think of? What has wars been fought over? People been killed for? Friends stabbing each other in their backs? Well, that right there is Benjamin Franklin's. When I say Benjamin Franklin's, I'm talking about money. Well, back to my initial question. What classifies a person? It's not the color of their skin. It's not where they went to school. A person is classified by how much money they have and how they spend their money and what they buy with their money. So I have an example here. People who buy Ferraris typically hang out with people who buy Ferraris, and people who shop at the same supermarket typically hang out with people that shop at that same supermarket. Well, that question about society and money allowing us and classifying us is up for a much larger debate. But basically what I'm here to talk to you about today is the American fallacy of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. As you may have heard, a bill was just passed stating that by 2025, all states would have a federal law implementing that there would be a $15 minimum wage. And basically what I'm going to do here is tell you about why this would be bad for businesses and workers across America. So I have three main points here. My first is that I think there would be less hours available to workers. Also, my second point is that there would be less workers hired. And my third and final point is that prices would be increased in shops, basically ruining a lot of people's businesses. So basically, I'm going to start with this, is that there's a 6 to 7% increase, 6 to 7% decrease, in the amount of hours that people will be allowed to work. I'm all about for equality, and that's why I wanted to pick a side that has an economics, because based on my economics background, I wanted to pick an issue that relates to economics and that is so polar, where it's opposite so what I'm going to do is lay out my sides of the argument and sort of refute the sides of the other side of the argument that I don't even necessarily agree with. And so basically my first point, going back to that, less hours are available. So as you can see here, is a 6 to 7% decrease in the amount of hours available. And according to MSNBC, their average work week is going to be reduced to around 32 hours available to the average worker. Obviously, we know that people in America are trying to work 40 hours a week. That's what we know is the typical work week. And basically, it sort of refutes the other side's argument in itself, saying that why would you pay someone more and allow them to work less? It just doesn't make the sense, because if they're working more and earning less, then it's basically the net same. So if the main argument is disposable income, I just really don't see that playing out here and working really well, because people are working less and there are less hours available to them, which lowers their disposable income at the time. My next point is that there is a 15% decrease in the amount of people hired in America. And basically, my facts on this is, according to Fox News, employees are like 3 to 4 times more likely to stay at their job and not leave if the minimum wage is raised, because basically right here on this graph is comparing 4 different types of restaurants. There's full service restaurants, limited service restaurants, and fast food. Basically what this graph sort of is explaining is that if a fast food worker is earning the same wage as a person who works in a full service restaurant, where is it fair there? And this isn't including tips, because obviously if you work at a high-end restaurant, tips will be higher and fast food workers aren't tipped. But necessarily saying for the basic average employee, why would someone want to work at a 2 to 3 times more difficult job if they're going to receive the same pay? So that's why people are 3 to 4 times more likely to stay within their career and really not move around much. And what this does is it really saturates the market with people that are all looking for the same thing in a sense. And if people are looking for the same thing with a really saturated market, it's really hard to find work. So less people are being hired in the market. My third and final point is that basically just stating back to an economic principle, we see here that there's going to be a 12% increase on every item in restaurants, stores, anything that you can think of. Every single thing is going to be, the price is going to be increased by 12%. And basically, just a basic economic principle is that if price goes up, demand goes down. And basically, in just putting that in layman's terms and saying if something's more expensive, people are going to buy less of it. And if people are buying less of an item, this is going to allude to revenue being less in certain businesses. And if revenue is less and an employee is your most expensive cost, people are going to eventually start trimming employees and cutting employees because they're not going to be making the revenue because people are spending less money. So necessarily in a sense, it's really a long-term effect here, because if price goes up and people are spending less money, then why would there be a point to raise the minimum wage if people aren't even going to be having need to be hired? So that's where I'm going to wrap it up right here. Well, this is actually another graph right here where it just sort of shows different states and their minimum wages. I thought this would be interesting because, sort of an example of California, Chicago, those are two states with higher minimum wages, and as I said earlier, there was a federal law passed, but this sort of just shows just the sort of political spectrum of where, minimum wage laws lie. And I thought that was a really important point. Just in conclusion, I like to put this into three things. I really like to think of this as a long term, because obviously on paper it looks great, and you know what, I'm one for equality too, and I think that people should be treated equal. But the only thing is, I think when it comes to money, I don't think that people should necessarily all be allowed to earn the same, because just based on education and different things. But when you really think about this in a long-term sense, over time, I think this is really going to decrease business, and it's really going to end up backfiring because people are going to be hiring less, people are going to be working less, and it's just realistically, on paper, it seems great, but when you realistically look at the long-term effects, it is not the best plan. I also like to use this metaphor: if you give a mouse a cookie, they're going to want a glass of milk. Basically, us allowing people to have a minimum wage of 15, and if we give them this minimum wage of 15, it's going to be slowly increasing over time. 10, 15 years down the road, people are going to be wanting more, 17, 18, eventually $20 per hour. And with inflation and things like that, it's just really almost not even feasible to think of, because if you keep giving and giving, then there's almost a point. And in conclusion, what I have to say here is that this realistically is one of the biggest American fallacies of all time, because it is something that just almost cannot even be true, because when you realistically look at it on paper, it's just something that is a fairy tale realistically. And I am one for equality, as I'll say again. But now I'm going to turn it to my audience over here, just to ask them if they have any questions or anything about the laws. And so here I'm going to flip it over to you. Do you have any questions regarding minimum wage in America?
Yeah. When is this law supposed to go into effect?
This law goes into effect as of 2021.
2021.
January 1st, 2021.
And I kind of tend to agree with you that higher wages will cause less work, because it's going to raise prices.
Yes.
And it's going to decrease economic output.
I completely agree with you. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm glad that I was able to share this information with you, and have a great day.
Thank you.